The reason why we make this show is to see if we can help you.
I'm getting a noise.
What sort of noise?
Sounds like...
Pull to open.
Pull to open!
Yes, and what do you do?
Oh, it's like a tapestry. It's gorgeous. It stitches you in. You become all complicated and knotted and vivid.
I love that.
Yeah. Two things bumping together unexpectedly. They can surf the waves of time.
That's Christmas ruined.
Well, season of goodwill and all that. Hey, try not to kill each other.
Davina McCall, 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 Davina McCall. Hello and welcome to not the Davina McCall Fan Club podcast. No, this is Pull to Open, an ongoing quest to watch all of Doctor Who. All of it in completely random order. Really, it's really random. I know it's going to be hard to believe given the Doctor Who story we're about to talk about this week, but really, it's completely random. Scout's Honor. Oh, I'm Pete Paschal.
Oh, and I'm Chris Taylor, and I am gagged in a sense here today.
What's going on? Were you thrown into hold from some weird, vehicle of mythical creatures or something? Are you?
Well, Pete, as a journalist, you know how things work where big media organizations like Disney may sometimes send out screeners of episodes in advance, and then they might provide embargoes of dates beyond which you can talk about those screeners.
Whoa. You got a screener of some forthcoming episodes of Doctor Who?
Yeah.
And I didn't?
Isn't it interesting that the titles have now been revealed? So we now know that episodes 1 or 2, and it wouldn't be a spoiler to point out that episodes 1 or 2 of the new Ncuti Gatwa season are called Space Babies and The Devil's Cord. And yeah, that's it's interesting. I appear to have appeared here from the future, where I've seen the future, but I can't talk about it. But
wow, it's like boom, you're here from the future.
It's like boom, yes, to name episode 3, which I haven't seen, just to be clear. But yeah.
Okay, so in your mind, you have knowledge, you have spoilers, sweetie.
Yes, I have
of
spoilers.
What is coming up, but you have restrictions.
I have restrictions. This podcast, if all goes well, you're listening to this podcast on May the 4th. Now, there may be some restrictions lifted on reviews of the new Doctor Who episodes on May the 6th. So you may want to listen out for some special Pull to Open content.
Well, I look forward to hearing about them at that time.
Yes,
Mr. Secrets. Okay, good times.
Oh boy, yes. So why don't you catch the folks up on where we've been and how we got to this very bizarre situation?
Yes, I suppose we can talk about the past.
We can totally talk about the past.
The future is still to be written. So previously on Pull to Open, our recent random journey took us to many places in the Doctor's timeline, but it was pretty far back. A few stories ago when we were hanging out with Tom Baker and Matthew Waterhouse and Sarah Sutton and Anthony Ainley, all in The Keeper of Traken.
Was that really just 3 stories ago? We were so much younger.
Younger than we could before we robbed a couple of bodies on our way out from that story and tried to rejuvenate ourselves. Didn't go so well, clearly. But maybe it was all a dream, because a couple stories ago we were actually at the Christmas special, the first Christmas special, the 2014 one for Peter Capaldi in Last Christmas.
The first and possibly one of the best Doctor Who Chrissy specials.
Yep. Very notable for a lot of reasons. Go back and listen to that one. That was a fun time. But it's a little bit of foreshadowing, certainly for this week. But in the meantime, we went on a journey.
Oh boy, did we ever.
We were bouncing around all over the place, just like series 13 did, because we did the entirety of that season and did a whole podcast on it. It was, of course, Doctor Who Flux.
Yes, Flux, as we called it at the time, or as I've just remembered that the toy maker called it Deflux. And I think the toy maker was as confused by it as we were. But yeah, go listen to that. Word of warning: do turn your levels down. I get a bit ranty. I may have been just a little bit too close to the microphone in some areas, but yeah, no, that was still a fun therapy session.
Yeah, it was a fun pod.
Yeah,
and we were just as relieved as Jodie Whittaker's doctor was to put the flux behind us. And just keep on moving forward. But it moved us all the way forward, that randomizer did. It actually took us to the first full adventure with Ncuti Gatwa as the Doctor, and actually still the most recent adventure as of this recording.
Yes.
It was, of course, the 2023 Christmas special, The Church on Ruby Road.
Extraordinary. Unbelievable. The randomizer, brought to you by Disney Plus, takes us to the church on Ruby Road just in advance of the new season dropping.
Right?
I think part of what's going on here is that the randomizer has been listening in on the Whomoji challenge, which we've got coming up, which always talks about torturing Chris. So it has, in fact, decided to torture Chris by taking us to the very latest episode, to the Ncuti Gatwa episode, right when I was, maybe going to be in possession of some future knowledge, but that I couldn't talk about. I mean, this is a real time traveler short story here.
You sound really ambivalent. You sound like you're torn. You sound like you could bi-generate at any moment.
I could.
Future Chris just spouting off spoilers about everything that's coming up. And just giving me full storylines and hey, here's what the 16th Doctor is.
Oh yeah. Wait, you saw them too? Oh God, yes. I would love to bi-generate right now. Just 50% of me go off into retirement. That sounds good to me.
Well, that would be a pretty good deal for you, because then only one of you would have to endure what's happening next, which of course is, what's that? The Whomoji challenge?
Oh yes. Oh God. Okay.
Right.
Yes.
I'm telling you, sir, after doing the TLDW for Flux last time, I'm going to all the sympathy I used to have for you on these is pretty much gone for the next few months. I'm just going to be squeezing until all your Doctor Who knowledge until emojis start spilling out of your ears, man.
I got to say, to anyone listening to the Whomoji challenge last week who was screaming at the podcast, "It's Delta and the Bannerman, you idiot." I too did exactly that when listening to the podcast at myself. I can't believe that I didn't remember the mathematical symbol delta.
The triangle.
The triangle.
I'm trying to give it to you without saying the word. It's this hard.
I will never now in my life ever forget that delta is represented by a triangle. So, thanks, Ace. Look forward to more schooling.
Well, let's see if you remember what these symbols this week correspond to in the real world, or perhaps the Doctor Who universe. We have the last of our series of Whomojis from JC17 Ace on Patreon. Thank you, Ace.
Thank you, Ace, he said sarcastically.
This is the last one, and it is 5 emojis. Are you ready, sir?
Oh God, 5 emojis. Yeah, Ace doesn't do them short. I guess I'm ready.
Okay, here it is. First emoji, the Nepal flag. Second emoji, a bear.
What?
Third emoji, a snowman.
Okay.
Fourth emoji, the Milky Way. And fifth emoji, the brain.
Oh my God. You might as well have just typed out random emojis on your keyboard for all that I'm going to get that. I mean,
Let me drop this in the chat.
Yes, while you're doing that,
on whatever you want.
I will say that Nepal flag immediately takes me to Deflux, because there was the Nepalese guru there. Yes.
It is not Flux.
It's not Flux. Nepal flag, the only other thing I'm thinking of that's set anywhere near Nepal is Marco Polo.
It is not Marco Polo.
Oh, no. Oh, God, there's another one, isn't it? Is it a Sir Buster McCoy that I haven't seen? Oh,
I'm not going to... I could tell you which emoji to zero in on, but I'm just going to say a word of the title is
buried in here.
Description. Like, basically, if you would describe this emoji, it's in... that word is in the title.
Is it the snowman?
It's you almost got it.
The abominable snowman. Yes,
there it is. Oh, sorry, Dalek Zapper.
Yeah, we're just saying our sound effects now.
Honestly, when I said Nepal flag, which is what they give here, I thought for sure that just gives it away with the first emoji.
I totally. It's amazing how little the titles of Doctor Who stories I haven't seen retain in my head. So good. I now know that there's the abominable snowman. That must be the Great Intelligence, right? The brain.
Yes.
Yes. Absolutely, okay.
Yeah. And then appearance.
Yeah.
The Great Intelligence.
Not yet, Richard E. Grant.
Not yet. Or perhaps in the past it was at that point, right? Because that was the Web of Fear when they did all the stuff with the London Underground, but it was the same deal. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Thank you, Ace. And I'm so glad that I did not torture the listeners by spending any more minutes
I was just going to say, the listeners are even more glad. Like, this agonizing journey was only a minor cut on the way to getting some good emojis. Thank you, Ace. And of course, you as well can have your emojis read out on the pod and subject Chris to some torture by giving him titles of episodes he has not ever seen. The best way to do that, of course, is by leaving a review for the podcast in whatever app you're in, but the Apple Podcast app is probably the best place. It'll get to us very directly. Go ahead, leave a review, put your emoji in the title of the review. It's always nice to have an answer key, but either way, we will have it feature on a future emoji challenge.
That's right. You can also leave it on Patreon when you go support Pull to Open there, as Ace did. So that's another way you can support the pod. And if you're on Spotify, you can help us by rating the show. We've got a very nice, close to complete 5-star rating on Spotify at the moment. So thanks for that. And also, poll from the bottom of your screen. That's right, it's Poll to Open. There's a poll right there at the bottom right now. It is asking you to think what you thought of the church on Ruby Road, according to our increasingly complicated rating structure. But we have, appropriately enough, we have some Christmassy / Easter ratings right now, given that Church on Ruby Road mentions both Christmas and Easter. So does Last Christmas. Last Christmas, of course, has 7 mentions of Easter, making it the most seasonally appropriate thing that the randomizer could have taken us to for Easter, as it in fact did. And if you recall, on the show, we both gave it our highest possible rating, which is the Viscount Banger, and a stunning 71.4% of you agreed with us that it is one of the best in Doctor Who history.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice to know we all hold the correct opinion.
I know.
Whoever voted for the Professor Hater and the Ogron, both of which had a decent showing, but very low, very, very, very distant second.
I can't think who would rate this.
Don't get it.
I can't think who would rate this an Ogron. Like, the only thing I could think is that, as I mentioned during the podcast, like, if you only watch the first 20 minutes of Last Christmas, you might think it's just a kind of a overly schmaltzy Christmassy mess. Maybe that's what happened. Someone just watched the first 20 minutes. But yeah,
could be just some anti-Christmas people who give all the Christmas specials Ogrons. Get your Ogrons in your stocking, but this is definitely the first Christmas.
Yes.
David. Like, it's the most highly rated one that we've done so far. Certainly our favorite. Now, we haven't done them all, but it would be tough to top.
Yeah, it's definitely better than the other 2 that we've done, Christmas Carol, which we also liked, and Dr. Wither and the Wardrobe, which we kind of liked. But now, the randomizer's taken us to another Christmas story, so close after Last Christmas.
Yeah, I said tough to top. Let's see if the Church on Ruby Road does it. But before we can get to our correct opinions on the Church on Ruby Road, now I just want to Remind viewers, if you want to hear our hot take on the church on Ruby Road, which we recorded the night of its, well, I almost said broadcast. I guess it was the broadcast, but we streamed it.
Yes.
We're international folks. We're both in the States. But the night it dropped, we did a hot take. So you can go back and listen to that, our first impressions of it. This is the cold take. This is the official pull to open take. Now, it's going to be interesting to do it because we don't have the benefit of looking back at the entire season and everything they've set up here. And even though one of us has a little foreknowledge, we can't talk about it right now. So it was an interesting time for the randomizer to take it out because it really is going to force us to judge this story on its own merits.
Yes.
So I'm looking forward to that right after we summarize the plot. And when I say we, I mean one Chris Taylor will be summarizing the church on Ruby Road, and we allot a full minute for every episode of the reboot.
However,
Modern Who.
We do a little extra time for specials.
We tend to give an extra 15 seconds, usually because that's a longer runtime. Was that the case here? What was the runtime of the church on Ruby Road?
That is a very good question. I don't know. We can quickly look that up just to bolster my case.
It says 55 minutes here on IMDb. Ooh. So that does look a little longer than your average. I mean, it's not as long as some of the other Christmas specials.
Yeah.
But you know what? Christmas, it's all about tradition. It's all about
thank God.
Just kind of doing things because you've just always done them, and to some extent. And we have a lot of nostalgia. So in the spirit of the season, I think we can grant you an extra 15 seconds.
Oh, bless you, sir. Bless you, Governor. Bless you, Mr. Scrooge.
So on your way, boy. Let's get this party started. And
you there, boy. Which church is this? Yes. Okay.
All right. Well, it's time for the official pull to open summary of the church on Ruby Road. In 3, 2, 1. Go.
Okay, so there's a woman named Ruby Sunday, and she's being interviewed by British TV presenter Davina McCall about her history because she's a foundling, and she has foster family, Carla and Cherry Sunday, who took her in, and now they're all in London. And Cherry Sunday is kind of bedbound, but yeah, they've got a neighbor, Mrs. Flood. And anyway, they also have a new foster baby, Lulu Bell, but she gets stolen on Christmas Eve, and Ruby chases after her, but she's being taken up a ladder by some goblins into a giant goblin ship on the sky.
Seconds.
And this guy who's been watching her from her dancing nights out and her performing nights out is following her across the rooftops. They both go up to the goblin ship. They sing a song. They rescue Lulu Bell. They bring her back down. But no, it turns out the goblins were actually going after Ruby when she was dropped off on the church steps on Ruby Road. And they go back in time. They surf the waves of coincidence to go back and pick her up. And the Doctor's trapped in this world where Ruby didn't exist, and Carla and Cherry are sad, but he goes back and he destroys the goblin ship and the church, and Ruby's okay and everything's okay, and everyone and Ruby goes off for the adventures, and Mrs. Flood says, "Have you never seen a TARDIS before?"
So time
winks at the camera while she's doing it.
Right. Everything but the wink. You got in under time.
Everything but the wig?
The wink.
Oh, the wink, yes.
The wink, I guess.
I don't know if she was wearing a wig. Yes. Wow.
All right. Well, that was good stuff.
Thank you.
And honestly, it's not too timey-wimey. It's not too wibbly-wobbly. It's not too windy-findy. It's not any of those things. It is kind of like there's some stuff that happens. I'm reluctant to call it straightforward, because there's weirdness that happens all over the place that's never really explained, and we'll get to that. But it's not as ambitious as it seems, right? There's the church on Ruby Road seemingly has a lot to do, and it does, right? So it's got to not introduce Gatwa, but it's his first full episode as the Doctor.
Yes.
And so you kind of have to establish him as the leading man.
You have to be able to step into the show here. And both this and Space Babies, the first episode of the new season, were designed by Russell T Davies, according to Doctor Who magazine. I'm not revealing anything, Disney, to be good jumping on points.
Yeah. So you got to showcase. These are both showcases for Gatwa, in other words. But this one also has to introduce Ruby and make us care about her. It's got to kick off essentially an arc plot of some kind, which it kind of does with Mrs. Flood and everything going around with Ruby and her whole backstory. It's got to do Christmas.
Yes.
And it just generally has to set the tone for this new era of Doctor Who. And does it do all those things? I guess, like this is what I'm saying. Like it does those things. So I think on some list that you're ticking boxes off of, it succeeds. But I would say ticking boxes isn't the same as telling a story. And I think if you judge it on its own merits, as I was talking about, I think there is so much that's sort of frustrating and infuriating and lots of missed opportunities, partly because I don't think it's really that ambitious. That Church on River Road, I mean, it feels to me like a squandered opportunity.
Interesting. Well, we're going to have an interesting podcast here because I really liked it even more the second time, and in fact the third time, because I did watch this twice. One of those times knowing what comes next. So that was a very interesting experience. And I got to say, every time I watch it, I like more and more what Russell T Davies did here. I think to add a box to your checklist, I think it just has to be fun for like the Disney audience as well, right? And especially for kids. I think one thing RTD is doing, and you probably tell this from the title Space Babies with the new season, is kind of, bringing it back to its roots. Doctor Who is a show for kids. Fundamentally. Now, it's a lot of people have grown up with it. It's a show for adults as well. It's very interesting and naughty and timey-wimey and sciencey and, naughty. Very, very
A-N-O, everyone.
Very, very appropriate for this episode where the Doctor learns the language of rope. I didn't even include that in the TLDW, but yes, definitely the kinkiest Doctor we've seen. Big fan of rope. I'm talking about kinks and rope, of course, everyone.
Well, let me just qualify. Like, I hear you. Here's the thing. What I would say about Church on River Road 2 in terms of, and this is a meta comment, not about the story itself. I wanted to like it. We all wanted to like it. We're, as fans, super excited about a new era of Doctor Who. Plus, we're just fairly starved for it. Like, yes, we had the specials, but all of those were kind of scrunched together, and we just haven't had a consistent sort of dialogue with the show and with each other about the show in a long time. Really, probably not since Flux, if you think about it.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. In the latest Doctor Who magazine that just dropped, RTD is talking about how, we're about to have a proper season. We haven't had a proper season since 2021. And I was like, is that real? What? 3 years ago? Is that real? Yes, it really is. And of course, the randomizer just took us there to Deflux. Yes, and we had all sorts of issues with that. Like before then, for all the specials, we had Jodie's second season. Like I've not been this excited about a season of Doctor Who since I don't know. I mean, I've got to say, Chibnall's first season, the first Jodie season, in terms of the anticipation.
Yeah, the anticipation. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I hear that. So I liked what you said about him sort of rebooting for kids, but I also think in practice, he's not doing a good job. And I'm not even going to pull out till the end my heavy artillery, which is to say I have
kids. You have some kids.
Might be anecdotal, but there are some opinions I'm going to share that they had. But let's start at the top. Let's start with the first thing it had to do, which is shooting Gatwa.
Yes.
And honestly, I think this is starting off on a good foot because, I mean, he's great. Okay? Yes. He is, I mean, we knew this. I mean, I've seen just like one episode of Sex Education. We've talked about that before on the podcast. But even like he was one of the best things about it. He's just a great, charming actor. He's a guy you just immediately are taken to and just your eyes go to him. You want to know what he's up to. He's got that sort of twinkle in his eye. He's just magnetic.
Yes.
And his smile, his energy, there are great assets, and this script really plays them up. There's a lot of physical stuff he does. There's a lot of great situational stuff, like he was in a bar with Ruby early on, and then sort of, the not quite meet cute, but the meet intrigue that sort of happens with them. So in terms of showcasing our new Doctor and getting us to like him, yes, checked that box 500 times. Yes, I like Ncuti Gatwa. I want to see more of him. Good stuff.
And it really is. I mean, I obviously I didn't mention it. I didn't have time for it in the TLDW, but the first scene where you see him watching Ruby play the keyboard in her band, which is, by the way, and we'll get to the Goblin song later, but one thing I had an issue with in the hot take was, how is Ruby suddenly able to be musical and sing a verse of the Goblin song? Well, I'd completely forgotten about the fact that we first see her. Well, we don't first see her. The Doctor first sees her in a band. Like, she is musical, so that's established, and it's really nice to sort of notice that, especially after coming here from Deflux, where there were things that we were maybe supposed to notice all over the place, and Tribunal just didn't have a clue how to signal stuff. We're getting signaled from the start that Ruby is musical, and that has implications going forward in the rest of the season as well. But it's really nice. It's really nice because we're just sticking to Ncuti, that you get that first image of him, in the orange, in the hat, just as he's watching Ruby. That is a lovely introduction to the new Doctor before we then see him on the dance floor.
It's a good moment because that was we all kind of thought that was going to be his outfit for a while there, right? Yeah. And I like that was a bit of a mislead, and that the fact that he's got style. And there was a recent video from, it'd be probably a few weeks ago now that this is when the podcast drops, but there was a video that Gatwa did where he was explaining Doctor Who and all the Doctors. It's on YouTube, so I'm sure you've probably seen it if you're listening to this podcast. But there's a great bit where he stops at John Pertwee and he gives the most natural, this is my guy. Yes. He's dapper, he's stylish, he's the man about town, and you can tell Gatwa's kind of modeling himself after that. Now, I'm sure, Davies is probably architecting a lot of this, but obviously they're leaning into his strengths, and I think that's great. One thing I will say, though, it's a little unusual because we haven't seen that flamboyance, I guess is what I'm getting at, really since Pertwee, not in a huge kind of way. So I contrast that, and again, I think this is fine, but it is, like I say, unusual to see the Doctor in that club being cool. Like, no one's thinking this guy's a dork, which you would think if it was, say, done by Smith or even Tennant, and they were trying to be cool in a bar, I don't think they could really pull it off. And I think the whole scene would be about them not pulling it off, and it'd be funny. Whereas here, he's just kind of cool, and she's not just, when she notices him, she's not just like, this is weird. She's like, this guy's cool. Like, I'm impressed.
Pete, I've got some interesting headcanon for you, and this is literally just coming through, and it's just as you were talking about Pertwee and Gatwa, I realized. So the Doctor has a new round of 12 regenerations, right?
Well, I mean, it depends which version of this. Yeah, let's say it is.
Let's say that, Capaldi is Hartnell. Capaldi is regeneration 1.
Right. Okay.
Whittaker is Troughton. We could talk about ways in which they compare. That makes Gatwa Pertwee.
If you don't count Tennant 2, which I guess
if you don't count Tennant 2, yes, but okay, you're right. That does kind of mess things up.
Well, I mean, you can argue that season 6B, which again I will reiterate, you do not need. You don't need season 6B to explain all the stuff with Trout, but never mind that.
Oh my god! Thank you for saving my headcanon.
You could slot in Tennant into a 6B interpretation of the movie.
Yes,
and then it works.
The 6B we never had. Yes, okay. The full season Doctors, we'll say, is the third full season Doctor. I mean, Tennant couldn't do anyone other than Tennant, right? So,
sure,
that's the spanner in the works. But yeah, Gatwa as Pertwee is an interesting thing because yes, the Doctor is rarely this cool, and no Doctor, even Pertwee, could not carry off dancing on a dance floor in a undershirt and a kilt to drum and bass.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's unusual, but it's a nice sort of intro between the two, and I think it sort of is a good bridge to us liking Ruby as well. So let me rewind just a little bit because there's a couple scenes before that. Like one is obviously the cold open. Now I got to tell you, I don't really like it. I think choosing to have Gatwa come in and narrate this as a mystery, and it's very short. It's a very conventional mystery. It feels like we don't, it's just at this point we don't even know who Ruby is. Like it's just this baby was abandoned here and someone walked away. It just doesn't give you enough. Like, I don't care right now. And I feel like this is not starting on a bad foot, but it's not the strongest foot this could have started on. And also, like, it's just Gatwa narrating and he's sort of very serious, and that's not his best side. He's not fun in this narration. He's just saying this happened, and that no one knew this woman's name until the time traveler came, which seems to imply we're going to find out her name in this episode, and that some part of that mystery will be revealed, and it never is. And again, you have to take the story on its own merits, but mostly because I just don't know anything that's happening now. Like, I can't. How am I supposed to care about this or even think this is the right way to open this story because you're not paying it off?
Well, if you want sorry. Yes.
We got to get you one of those memory worms, dude.
Wouldn't that be great? Yes, I could just write my review, box it up, send it off, and then experience the stories afresh. That would be awesome. Yeah, I got to say on the biggest story of the woman and the snow and the church steps. Imagine the Watcher standing across the road from you, and the Paddy Kingsland music kicking in the background, and
I love imagining the Watcher.
The Watcher, yes, from Legopolis. In case you're not familiar,
not the bald guy from Marvel Comics. Oh, okay.
Not that Watcher. Yes, the Legopolis Watcher. Yes, is beckoning you over for a little chat about the woman in the snow. Yes, okay. Well, that's I got to say, right from the start, I think I was hooked, and I think it's the fact that the Doctor was crying in that scene as he looks at the woman, and that is, I think it's not a spoiler to say that is meaningful.
Interesting. Well, because we don't really know Gatwa at this point, I don't know how much it really would have affected me, right? Like if it was, contrast that if it was, say, like Capaldi, right? Who sort of famously stoic and just cross all the time. That would have been powerful. But we already kind of know Gatwa as a motive, a little bit, at least from what we saw in the giggle. So honestly, it just didn't do a whole lot for me. It didn't, again, I don't think it's the worst way to open it. I just think it was a very safe way to open it. And the things that it thinks we care about, we don't. And this makes me worry that a little bit that RTD is getting in his own head too much and perhaps getting ahead of himself too much, particularly since there's such an opportunity here for new audiences. More on that in a bit. Yes.
But yes, let's just stick with Gatwa. Let's get him out of the way. I mean, it is just extraordinary because the Doctor is so vulnerable in this episode and cries. That beautiful moment in the It's a Wonderful Life segment where he looks at Carla Sunday and he says, "Why are you crying then?" Like
and he's crying, he's weeping too.
And he's weeping too. Oh my God, chills, absolute chills in that moment. So he's that vulnerable, but also he's in some ways the strongest Doctor we've seen. Like he's not sort of wibbly and Hugh Grantish as a lot of Doctors are. He's very confident. He's got that poetry confidence.
Yeah, he absolutely does. And
the scene with the policeman, I think, is probably the strongest moment for that.
Yeah, and I talked about that in our hot take, and I'll reiterate that. That's one of my favorite scenes, and I'm so glad it comes early on because it's not just a good scene for him as an actor and a good character moment. It's reassuring me that RTD hasn't gone completely fantasy in the way that Moffat would just do whatever. He has a good Sherlock Holmes explanation for how he has reasoned what this cop is about to do, which is, of course, propose to his girlfriend on Christmas. And just lists off the things and reminds us that, oh, yes, the doctor may be super smart. He may be on this level that is just incredible, but he's not superhuman. He doesn't have yes, he has sort of quote unquote powers here and there that are fairly established, but it's like he's basically a guy, and who's really, really smart. And I think sticking with that as much as he can is good. It's too bad, not with respect to Gatwa, but with respect to the story he's telling here, he kind of does forget about that. He goes into full fantasy mode in a lot of places, particularly with the goblins. But Gatwa, 100%, he delivers this. Again, I think we said that this in the hot take, like he is showing that he is up for the job, and he is very, very capable. Here's the thing, though. There's other scenes I want to key in on that we didn't in the hot take, which aren't so indicative of Gatwa or his doctor, but speak to the what I would describe as the applause sign nature of this episode, which is to say you are constantly poked and prodded to acknowledge how clever it is, how fun it is, and it's kind of done in a way that it's not really on the show or the scene's own merits. It's just like, hey, we're playing this up because we want to really like put exclamation marks on everything. Let me tell you what I'm talking about.
Okay,
so
yes, please.
The scene where Ruby and the doctor are tied up, and she's asking, what's with these time traveling goblins? And he's like, if time travelers, they're like time riders at best, and blah, blah, blah. He has this very over the top reaction to the line where it's clearly put in there to make a joke about him being a little bit full of himself as a time traveler and having a little bit of status, but it's not set up properly. Like, she's not in any way impressed by the goblin. She's not like, wow, that's really cool. Like, there's no real lead in. Like, in other words, previous doctors, if they weren't trying to establish some character trait of his, which they're clearly trying to do here, they would just sort of go like, no, not really time travelers, more like time riders. And like he'd just sort of have this exclamation as to which sort of explains why the goblins aren't time lords, right? If they have time travel abilities, it's not in the same way the TARDIS is, travel anywhere, every star that ever was at any time. It's something different. And that's good to establish, because we need to do that. Do it this way with this over the top character thing. Again, like you're kind of poked to like, look, look at our character here and how funny he is, and how he has this sort of thing about him, which we didn't even ask, dude.
Well, that is a key moment, right? Because it does establish that, Ruby has to put it together at the end, right, when she realizes the doctor is a time traveler, and that's one of the hints. I had a completely different reaction to that scene. I've got to say, I think that totally worked. I think that was Gatwa establishing the a certain aspect of the doctor is still there, even for all his confidence and his vulnerability. And he's like a new man. He's been to therapy. He's all put together now. But there's still like, that is a thing that the doctor would get sensitive about. That, no, these goblins are not time travelers. Like, this is the core of his identity. Always has and always will be.
I don't think he's ever really done that so much, though. Like with this isn't the first time traveling race we've seen, right? Like we've seen other time travel races in Doctor Who, and he's just kind of like, he figures out, because he's smart and he understands time travel, like what they are. He tends not to. I mean, I suppose if you went through the whole canon, there'd be times where he points to the chip on his shoulder about it here and there, but generally not. I just felt like it was symptomatic, though, of something that I feel like it permeates this episode, where you kind of, again, you get this applause sign for things that are just too emphasized. There's too much of an exclamation point for it. Another one, I would say, is probably Ruby's family. Now, I want to talk about Ruby because I like her, and I really like Millie Gibson, and I think Millie Gibson might even be underrated as an actress. Like, after watching this again, I think she's very, very good. But the whole thing where they're these working class folks and they have hearts of gold, and we're still giving back, and we have this fridge full of foster kids. Again, and there's nothing wrong with it. It just feels kind of contrived. And like, the mom's name is Cherry Sunday. Oh, she's bedridden and all this stuff. It's a little bit like it's stage managed, like we need some kind of applause sign to root for these people. Like it's just too much. Like you can contrast that with Jackie Tyler, like I feel like that was much more real in terms of a backstory. And it just felt like interesting because it wasn't interesting. There was sort of something more authentic about the mundane there. And here, like, again, like I say, I don't mean to like say I hated it. I'm just saying, like, I don't think I needed all of these things together to get me to care about this scene, if you know what I mean.
I mean, it's, again, I'm straining against the gag here because I got to say that this is clearly what the whole season is about. Is about
an episode. We have to gauge the episode
and
this story on its merits. And again, I'll zip this around back to like the opportunity with new audiences. Like, do something self-contained and interesting that's going to keep me coming back. Don't just set up. Like, if this is like everything that I'm complaining about is somehow paid off later, great, but you should pay off more of it in the moment.
Yeah. I mean, I also, again, got to disagree with you on that scene, on the family. Like, yes, they have hearts of gold, and yes, I got real reality, kind of soap opera-ish vibes with the arrival of the woman from the foster care agency. And the way she's sort of casually chatting to them, like that felt real to me. She felt more real than Dan in Whole of Flux. My whole issue with Dan last week. What's this trade? But this is really like you instantly know what everyone's about here. Like, yeah, maybe a little cartoonishly drawn. That's what you got to do in a, in the short space of time that this episode allots. But I think that the fact that the Heart of Gold thing is then immediately contrasted with the other version of Clara Sunday in the world where Ruby doesn't exist. And that she's just she's broken. She's a broken woman who's just fostering the occasional kid for the 800 quid.
Yeah, the It's a Wonderful Life version.
Yes,
of her life. Yeah, that's good. I think that works, and I give the story some points for going. That's about as dark as it gets, where you see these Carla in particular, sort of the different version of her.
Yeah,
and you realize how important. And
it's literally dark. I want to point that out. Like, the most chilling thing watching it a second and third time is how different the flat looks when it comes to. I'm getting chills just thinking about it now. I mean, the whole "It's a Wonderful Life" concept is a really big one for me, a really important one. I think everyone kind of who watches that movie kind of connects with the idea, and Doctor Who's got to do it right, if they're going to reference it, do it right. And I think that it did here because in specifically because of those scenes and the washed out way that they look. And you notice that the flat doesn't have any Christmas lights up.
Right.
It's still Christmas Eve. It's still, Lulubelle and Ruby's birthday, but it's just drab. It's dull. And Cherry's pretty much dead already,
Like Doctor Who, it's a top-notch production now. I'll definitely give it that. Like the details of things like that and getting them right. We were praising Flux for similar attention to detail.
Yeah, the beauty of it really looks amazing.
It's really good. In this case, it really serves the story. Definitely agree. That was one of the strongest scenes in the Church on Ruby Road.
Yeah,
I think Gatwa and Carla. Want to get the actress right, just to make sure. Michelle Greenridge.
Yes. Greenridge. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's awesome.
Both playing off each other really, really well. We already care about Ruby, and here you feel the gravity of her, the Mavity.
The Mavity, indeed. What do you think about the fact that they're keeping that going?
I just want to say you feel the impact of her absence, and I like that you realize why she's so important, and she's important to the show, and she's important to this episode, I think, because she's the big catalyst on why you care about almost anything in it, in my view, and apart from Gatwa. So Mavity, really quickly, I think it's fine. Keep doing it. it's a good little in joke. I think it's intriguing to new viewers. Like, it's like, does he mean gravity? And it's like, yeah, like Google it, and if you Google it, you'll figure it out really quick. And it's like, oh, it's like, I like that. It's an easy to figure out in joke of the series that will, I think, in some cases serve as kind of a razor for fans of deciding if they want to be a fan or not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people will. They'll be like, oh, it's funny that you can go back, change a word. Oh, okay. Maybe they have some fun with time travel here. I like that.
Right. Instant in joke, so you sort of start to get the vibe of the whole Who fandom, right?
Yeah. So keep it going. I think it's totally fine. I also think it's a nice little signature for this era of the show and RTD.
Mm-hmm.
So go for it. But I definitely want to talk about Millie Gibson as Ruby, because I think definitely one of the best things about the episode. I think her intro, talking to Davina McCall, yes, it's convenient because she gets to talk about her whole backstory because she's being interviewed by it, but it sets up the scene later. Now, first, nice to see Davina McCall. We had our little intro here with her. Very cool. I didn't know who she was, really, to be honest with you, until this episode, but I've read a little bit about her, and I've realized I have seen her in various ways. Obviously, she was also the voice of herself, or droid version of herself, in I think it was Bad Wolf, right? In series 1. So
in the game shows. Yeah, so the show she hosts that most people know her for in the UK now is called Long Lost Family. Right. Which is why, she was perfect for.
And no, they never name check it. They're obviously she's doing an episode of the show on Ruby, so that's all good. And I that sort of verisimilitude is great. And if you can do it, awesome. I guess the equivalent here would be like if, I don't know, Barbara Walters. Well, I guess that she's probably not so much anymore. But the Wolf Blitzer interviewing you, I don't know, somebody.
I mean, you do got to say, if you want to criticize Davina McCall, you might use a line from Blink, which is, it's a bit ITV, isn't it? ITV being the independent television channel in the UK that is often sort of seen as a bit more lowest common denominator in its audience.
I see. Okay. Noted. Okay, LCD people. But this scene sets up the phone call later with Ruby on Christmas Eve, on her birthday. And I got to say, Millie Gibson is so good in this. Like, she is so clearly crushed by hearing the news that they couldn't find anything, that she's basically a big question mark. And she's keeping it together. And it makes you have sympathy for her, root for her, recognize her resilience. And also, I think, in a big way, recognize what the doctor sees in her. It's a wonder she doesn't have a complete breakdown. I mean, think about it. This is Christmas Eve. She's got to take care of her mom and her grandmother. She's just learned she's not going to learn anything from this long lost family show. She's dropped the the groceries. She also has now this other child to help take care of. It's a wonder she just doesn't completely break down, right? Like, she's keeping it together somehow, and she kind of never fully loses it, but obviously who wouldn't be doing that well? Like, I think most of us would just be like, I'm gonna go and get drunk or something. But
I think that the randomizer, one of the things that it's doing here, we'll get to our first the 4 questions later, why the randomizer brought us here, but I think it's very interesting to look at the comparison between 2 ways of introducing a companion. And I went on a long rant in the Flux episode, go and listen to it, about why I dislike Dan, even though I am a fellow official Scouse. And the way that he was introduced, and you just don't believe Dan. He has an empty fridge. He's starving himself. But why? You never get. He's never a well-drawn character. It's never believable.
He also doesn't look like he's starving.
Yes, exactly. So it just doesn't make any sense. But like Ruby, one piece of script writing, fiction writing advice they always give you is like, pile on. If you want to make a character sympathetic, pile on to them. Like, make the worst things you can imagine happen to them all at once. And everyone be like, oh yeah, I feel that. That's like me on my worst day. And you're absolutely right. dead on to focus on that phone call as the moment where we just start really feeling for Ruby. Maybe at the start we thought, oh, she's a little bit, she's annoying. She's on this TV show and she's talking a lot, and and then she's in this club and she drops her G&T and she's in a not very good band. Like you could legitimately sort of like not like Ruby through all of that. Now I think it's to Millie Gibson's credit that you do like Ruby through all that. But here she is getting everything dumped on her in a single moment. And that is, to me, the moment at which, she becomes alive and a real character you really care about that backstory of like, well, what is she? Where does she come from? Right. But simultaneously, like, she just lost the baby. Oh my God, that's the worst thing that could possibly happen. And like, I'm sure a lot of parents have nightmares like that. Not necessarily, goblins stealing your child, but like that moment of like the baby monitor suddenly gets weird noises and it goes silent, and then
there's a lot of like old tech on display there, by the way. Like the baby monitor, I guess people still use them, but also the Polaroid camera.
Yes,
which
interesting.
But I mean, you work with what you got, and they definitely tell a story. But that is a good segue to the goblins. And okay, I think this might be the turn in the podcast, because I got to say, I was kind of like so about them on the hot take. Now I really think they're probably one of the worst monsters the show's ever done. I mean,
wow.
They're this sneaky kind of, stocky kind of thing. They're basically like gremlins, right? This is what they do.
Yeah.
And they're basically stealing the plot of Gremlins in a lot of ways, because, it's Christmas and they're wrecking things. Here's the thing. Gremlins was actually kind of a legit horror movie. Okay. It actually showed the Gremlins doing truly horrible things to people and offing various people. And here they're kind of like, they're sort of doing a horrible thing. Yes, they're grabbing a baby and they're going to feed it to their king or whatever, alive. That's on paper horrible, but they never, like, I'm not endorsing that they should have had the Goblin King actually eat someone on screen, not at all. But it is like comparatively, these goblins are nerfed, right? Like they basically don't really do anything. They don't really even sort of show much of their threat apart from unplugging things and pushing lights down on people, which I will say, if you've ever been on the set of a TV show, there are a million ways you could die. So that is, there's a good reason health and safety exists. And then, there's many, that's very realistic.
You do think at that point that they've killed Davina McCall, but I think that is, it's hard to believe that they'd really do that. And we mentioned that in the hot take. RTD wasn't going to kill Davina McCall at Christmas.
But he could have killed someone, and he could have done other things, and they could have made the goblins not look quite so cute. They could have wrote it in a way that they don't just capture the Doctor and Ruby, or they do something worse to them. Like they capture why not just kill them? Like why are you putting them in the hold somewhere and tying them up? And I guess you could justify it by the whole like, oh, they need coincidence and they need some more coincidences to happen for them to actually time travel and get Ruby. I guess it's just so much of a stretch, and honestly it's really one of these sort of making up the rules things that's like Moffat on steroids. Honestly, it's just kind of like they're whatever you want, just because you want to have cute things running around and having a scene where they stand up and sing on a conveyor belt. Or or whatever, like it just doesn't really make any sense. I never bought them as a monster or a villain, and they were just frankly just too cute to take seriously.
That's interesting how opposite my reaction is. I mean, okay, yes. So to your point, one thing I will say is that I, both the second and third time, I found it hard to credit the idea that the Goblin King, as large and Jabba the Hutt as he is, would be satisfied with a tiny baby. And it's like, the Doctor does have a line about something like it's more like they're what they're feasting on is like the coincidence of, I guess the aura of coincidence and timey-wiminess around it.
Which is kind of like which is anything. That's like you're getting out of jail. It's too convenient of a thing that they're just doing this because of this. Well, no, you're doing it because you want to do it to show off this thing. And you're using it now as a blank check to do whatever you want. And I'm seeing right through it, dude. No.
Other than that though, I gotta say, I think the goblins were fun. I don't think they're anywhere close to the worst monster in a show that had the worst rats ever seen in the London sewers, and just to pull one example out, and ogrons. I mean, it just
rats kill people. And I will, after
ogrons kill people, I guess.
I would after this podcast make a case to change the ogron rating to the goblin rating.
Ooh, wow, hardcore.
Here's one point I'll give them. I do like the whole idea of rope technology or the rope language.
Mm-hmm.
That was actually interesting, and I think with some thought, you could honestly do a whole story that uses that as a plot device, not just to unlock the door in one scene. But they kind of mention it, and it's basically forgotten. I mean, think about how they could have written that ending differently, where he's at the church and he's just pulling it down with his Mavity gloves, and instead there could have been another whole act where he goes on board the ship, has some more back and forth with the goblin. You give the goblins more depth.
Yes.
You could actually have a conversation with them and figure out a little bit more about their motivations and why they're bad, and maybe even show them being a little more evil, and use that rope stuff again and have just a better ending than the tried and tested reset button that RTD always falls back on slamming as hard as he can, which of course he does again. So yeah, it's just a shame. It's a big missed opportunity, that rope technology, I gotta say.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're when you say you wanted more goblins, I'm with you on that one. Another goblin scene would have been great.
I only wanted more goblins to the extent it would have made them good. It's possible they would have been good, but as exists in this story, there is nothing in here to make me scared of them, care about them, or even understand them. We've talked about the song. It just doesn't quite work for me, even with the extra scene earlier that Ruby's in a band. It just doesn't feel right. It just feels cringe. It's never really explained why they have those lyrics at the ready. I don't care how musical they are. Like, you can just come up with lyrics on the spot. You need some reason for that. In the same way, like I said it before, I compared to Adventures in Babysitting, where that sort of believably slowly has the kids sort of come up with lyrics on a stage. But there's also, like, you could have easily gone the other way and done Buffy. You could have done Buffy musical, where there's some natural reason that they can suddenly do this. Instead, it's just sort of in between, right? We get these hints of like, because of what the toy maker did, even though it's not really cited in this episode, but there's sort of an implication that there's more of a fantasy tinge to this Doctor in this new era, which I am very wary of. Like, I had plenty of that with Moffat, and based on what I've seen here, if it's just going to be some excuse to do whatever, I don't think that's good storytelling.
Well, okay, fantasy. I'm not sure if this counts as fantasy, but Doctor Who's definitely had its fair share of gods and villains that are at the toy maker level, right?
Oh, OP villains for sure.
Yeah,
we just had them with the Ravagers.
Yes, exactly. So I think, without wanting to gag myself, we can expect more of that. But I also, knowing something about the future, I got to ask Pete, how do you feel about music in Doctor Who in general, songs in Doctor Who in general?
Oh, as a part of the soundtrack, I love it. I loved all the stuff that Davies brought to the table in his original run.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even the second episode, The End of the World, where they have the jukebox.
Mm-hmm.
And they start playing, I forget which Britney Spears song it is, but I think it's like Toxic or something.
Yes.
And that was really good. I love just sort of bringing that modernity, honestly, to the show. I like the music. Like, Murray Gold's brilliant. Like, that sort of, I think it's a guitar twinge. Like when there's the music when they pan away from the Master after he dies in Tennant's arms. Like, I thought that was perfect.
Yes.
It's like doom, 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 like just starting up something, and then of course the sound of drums, the whole thing.
Yes,
we do at the beginning of every single episode.
Yes, here come the drums. Here come the drums.
But you think about singing. We sing in praise of Total War. That was all right.
Total War. Yes, from the King's Demons. Go listen to our very, very early podcast on that.
Yeah, I think it can work. I just feel like here it was just cringe. I just did not like it. I thought it did not work. Also, I think it kind of did you think of this? I felt like it was the song from Return of the Jedi before the special editions. Like it felt like it was different because you have Jabba the Hutt.
You mean Ncuti Lek? Yes,
yeah. Lapti Nek. That's it.
Lapti Nek, Ncuti Lek. I can't remember which one it is, but yeah, that was not a great tune. I got to say, I have now listened to the Goblin song 4 times in this watching the show. I like it better every time. I think the song is a banger.
Okay.
We don't give ratings to songs on this show. We may have to soon, but yeah, I like that they're getting more
hatery to me. Feels like someone with a pipe and a tweed jacket is singing that song.
I like that they're getting more diegetic with it, which is a key word for Doctor Who music. One that maybe explained more in Doctor Who itself. So music that the characters can hear. I don't know if there's a word of like music not only the characters can hear but they sing with, but ultra diegetic.
So one more hit on, it's not on the goblins directly, but the whole thing with the ventilation shafts.
Yes.
Probably the worst thing maybe in the whole script, because it is this idea. It's similar to what you would criticize the pub quiz in 42 for. Yes, I get that it's a joke. They're making some joke about it. This is being a cliche in action adventure stories. You don't get away with it just by pointing out it's a cliche. You don't. And also, not only are you doing the cliche, you're doing it on something that it makes zero sense that any sailing ship would ever have ventilation shafts. And I'll admit here, I'm not a seafaring person. Maybe in modern sailing ships, they have big ventilation systems. So correct me if I'm wrong, viewers. But on an ancient looking pirate-esque ship that's essentially made of wood, how does that, like, again, I guess the joke is it's not supposed to make sense, but it's like, then, like, what are you doing? Like, it's like, you're, again, highlighting a stupid, nonsensical thing by pointing at it. No, I'm sorry. It's still stupid and nonsensical. I don't care that you know it is.
Are you saying that perhaps it's an incredible coincidence that those ventilation shafts were there?
Again, like, if that was the story and we were going to do infinite improbability drives and it was a story about probabilities and we were going to do all these things, like, this is unlikely, and that's kind of the point. You could kind of get away with that, and they actually did once in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And I forget the title of the episode, but it was fairly early in the run, where there was sort of this probability altering stuff they get with, and all these weird coincidences start happening, like including like a racquetball game between Bashir and Chief O'Brien and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, okay, I get it. That's the whole point. But here, like I said at the beginning, they're trying to do 5 or 6 different things. Like, if you want to do a cool story about probability, do it. Focus on that. Intrigue us with that idea. And I think that would actually be a better sell to new audiences. Like, oh, I get it. This is a fun show, but they zero in on sort of a scientific or philosophical concept each week or sometimes, and they really mine it for a good story. Here they didn't do it. They just sort of throw it in as a slapdash thing to cover up jokes they want to do, which I do not like.
Maybe this is the fact that we came here after Flux, and to go from Flux to this is like downing the worst porridge you've ever eaten in your life, followed by a lovely fresh glass of Christmas champagne where the taste just fills you with sparkles. Like it's just, you're absolutely right. I would not necessarily have put the ventilation shaft scene in, although I did laugh every time. I can't help it. It's the way Ncuti says ventilation shafts. It works for me. You're right. I probably would have saved that time for something else. Maybe, evened out the balance of, fun stuff that doesn't necessarily make sense with the stuff that's actually weighty and serious and important, supposed to make sense. I'm with you on that, but like, it's so close to there compared to Flux, which had everything was out of whack. We talked about this with the 7 billion dead dogs that just sort of happens off screen. The scale of it was huge. Like, it's kind of nice here to go to smaller scale, but with threads that you can pull on, right? If you're intrigued about a larger story.
If you want to open a door.
And this is, I just, on that note, I just want to bring up the fact, something we didn't talk about in our hot take is Susan Twist's character. I don't know if you know who she is. She's kind of famous, semi-famous actress in the UK. But she's the one who says, "Can you play Gaudete?" right at the start when she's the one in the audience watching the band. Now, she was also in Wild Blue Yonder. She was an assistant to. She was Mrs. Merridew, an assistant to Isaac Newton, a maid to Isaac Newton.
Why are we talking about her? I can tell you both of these are going, phew, I don't remember her.
Yes, okay, so she's a bit part, right? But we didn't notice her the first time. We didn't talk about it
this time.
Yeah. So there she is, and she's got there's a Radio Times story. Who is Susan Twist's character in Doctor Who? All the theories that I've just hit upon. There's an interview with her in Doctor Who magazine. Like, we were supposed to pay attention to the woman who was asking for Gaudete.
Were we? Okay, fine. Like, I mean, actually, this is a good transition to Mrs. Flood, because I want to talk a little bit about her again. And I don't have a lot of updates to what we said before, but the whole idea that we're supposed to care, right, about this person. And it's like I said earlier, this is RTD getting in his own head and his own storyline and thinking just having her present and saying some stuff is going to make us care about this character. Like, she, in my view, in this episode, she really does nothing interesting. She does nothing even really that unusual until the very end that piques your interest and makes you think, you want to have her go like, well, that was weird. Like, I want to know more about her or something like that. But then nothing really like that happens. She just complains about the TARDIS. She talks to Ruby here and there. And yes, even before the final line, she seems a little okay with the TARDIS being a TARDIS. But it's not in such a way that it's sinister or weird. It's just nothing there to walk away with. And again, it's this applause sign nature of this, where it's like, see, we have someone interesting. Look at that. See, we should, like, there's nothing interesting. Like,
see, no.
Final bit. It's like that. It's that poking of us. Like, you've never seen a TARDIS before. Not only is it like not enough to intrigue me, that is like the worst. It was the worst. Like, turn to camera moment. Like, I will gladly take 10 more incidents of Tom Baker turning to camera rather than live through that again. Like, that was a bad call.
Okay, two things. First of all, the turning to camera. I would like to draw your attention to the trailer for season 1, in which we see Ncuti Gatwa turning to camera and winking. Just as Mrs. Flood turns to camera and winks.
Trailers.
Yeah, no. But this is actually, you see him. He's in the 60s suit. He's got the afro, and he's turning to camera and winking. So you know that's a scene.
That's a terrible scene. That could be a terrible call. I haven't seen that adventure yet. Like, it was a bad. We're talking about the church on Ruby Road, and does this story succeed?
Okay. Let me tell you the other. I know.
Terrible moment. It was unanimous in my family. We all reacted with revulsion both times and ranted about it. Even my 11-year-old.
Number two of my things that I'm going to say here is, and if you've read the book Never Let Me Go, or seen the movie of it, it's a wonderful book, Kazuo Ishiguro, one of my favorite books, about a bunch of clones who find out that they're clones and they are basically being used for organ transplants. And it's the wonderful sort of horror.
Island.
Sorry?
Like, I saw The Island, which had a similar plot.
Similar plot. But the great thing about the book is, and this is going to sound weird, the beginning is so boring. so boring. It's just about this school and like the classes that they have, and this girl, this 9-year-old girl, has got, she's concerned about getting a tape from a friend, and I was reading this, going, God, this is so boring. And then I got to the end of the book, and I was like, holy crap. That completely changes my view of those early chapters. Now I understand why they were boring. Like, it was meant to be. Like, that school was actually an attempt to give these clone kids something of a normal life, right? Instead of they're normally just kept in pens in some warehouse somewhere, as is what you're led to believe, like, again, in a very subtle way. So I am prepared to, if it is a writer who is going somewhere, I think you have to make a choice. Do you trust them? Do you trust them that this is going to look different to you in the future?
Do I, as a fan of Doctor Who, trust
Russell T Davies?
With this?
Yes.
Sure. This is a mass media show that is new to Disney Plus.
Yes.
And is tasked, in fact, I would say it's necessary for it to win over new fans. This is why this decision is so baffling. So you're basically making the case that this is sort of the new Flux, and that this was I just saw the Halloween apocalypse, and I don't know whether or not this is going to pay off or not. That's not what he should be doing, frankly.
Okay, but look, the applause signs. Here's the third thing I'll say. The applause signs that you keep talking about, like, I didn't see them here at all. Maybe, again, that's coming from Flux, where there were so many applause signs of like, hey, it's an angel. Hey, it's the Sontarans. Hey, it's, it just felt so cynical. Whereas this, like, I didn't get that at all. I wasn't taken out of it. It wasn't any sense of like the writer is scrambling here to throw something that you're going to applaud. And I did, we're talking about bringing in new fans. I did watch Church on Ruby Road with a couple of new fans, and they both loved it. Newish. Yeah. Yeah, they got it. Like, there's the stuff, the fourth wall breaking, like, it doesn't matter so much to them. Or they're like, oh, well, I guess this is probably going somewhere, right? That's a fun little thing to do at the end. Oh, that's curious. The little winking to camera. I mean,
I would be curious on how, if they poll new fans only, like whether that was like a thing they hated or liked. That's a good question for them. But you know what? There are some other questions that we have to answer here, and those are, of course, the 4 questions to Doomsday. All right, a little goblin music there.
Nice to meet you, great big thing.
First question: why? God, why did the randomizer take it there?
Well, the randomizer just hates me. It wants to torture me. I'm like, I put the gag in my mouth several times. I've had to, like, not to, being from the future. Like, the randomizer wants maximum drama on the show. The randomizer is also sponsored by Disney Plus. We'll say that's one reason. Apparently, it wants to remind you that there's a new season of Doctor Who starring Ncuti Gatwa.
Randomizer better share some of that Disney money.
I know, right? We're going to have words with this thing. But no, it's so it really just wanted to take us here for maximum drama, for reconsidering Ncuti's first episode in the light of a new season dropping, and also to start thinking about comparing the last full season we had, which was Flux, which is where it took us last time, to the full season that's coming. And, of course, there's the last Christmas connection, both Christmas episodes that mention Easter, and that it bookended Flux with 2 Christmas stories with Easter in them that betoken more.
Yeah, lots of coincidence, you might say.
Lots of coincidence. And yes, that's the thing. I thank you for reminding me. Like, I really wanted to say that. I've been thinking about this all week. Like, if you were the randomizer and you were sentient, and you wanted to send us a message to that effect, sending us to an episode that says there are no coincidences right before the season opener, and all of the other connections we've mentioned, and then on top of that saying there are no coincidences. Like, I'm beyond scared of the randomizer. I want to open negotiations with the randomizer, and would like to remind it that journalists could be useful when taking over the planet.
Very good tip. So I didn't have much more than that. I have thought about this in that it's coming to, obviously, the very obvious reason we're dropping this right before the new season comes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the randomizer wants us to judge this episode based on it as an episode, as opposed to doing it months or even years later once all of season 1 is in our heads.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can sort of look back on it and maybe think about it, or perhaps even appreciate it in other ways. It's like, no, you judge it now, and I have, and I'm about to, but it's happening in about 3 questions. Because right now we have to move on to the second question, which is, what if the evil plot had succeeded?
Okay, so the evil plot is the goblins.
Mm-hmm. So they kind of have 2 evil plots. One is to eat Lulabelle, and
Mm-hmm.
one is to eat Ruby.
Yes.
So I don't know. I mean, in either case, it's pretty horrible. But
yeah, if we actually see eaten baby in this, I mean, I guess you wouldn't necessarily even see it. The Goblin King would just swallow it whole.
Well, the thing is, we do see the evil plot succeeding in the It's a Wonderful Life version of her existence. So you kind of have to presume, if it's Lulabelle that they end up eating initially, that there is, rather than a dark past, a dark future. And so, you can't really see Ruby deciding to go with the doctor if, that the baby's just been lost and presumably eaten, and whether or not she was involved or not in trying to rescue her. And, presumably Carla would be in trouble for losing the baby, and there would just be this terrible result for that family. You'd think there'd be some trauma there for losing it for Ruby and everyone. And so it's a very dark turn and a very different show, if that happens. And maybe Gatwa's doctor takes the goblins a little more seriously after that, and maybe this becomes some kind of vendetta for him to take them down.
Yeah, that could be it. I got to bring in here, since we're talking about Lulabelle. I've been holding back on the headcanon all episode, because of course I can't really headcanon, because some things I know is coming next, so I can't legitimately headcanon. But I do have one piece of headcanon that's not related to the upcoming stuff. It's the fact that the doctor says he wishes his name was Lulabelle, and I gotta wonder if Lulabelle isn't the first baby that the baby that we see coming through in the Timeless Child. It could actually be the doctor. So that would be interesting.
Well, it's too bad you said maybe it's not the first baby, because you kind of have to presume, if the goblins exist at all, and they have some kind of society, that they make some regular work of this. That they often eat babies, and you would think the doctor would not ever want them to go back, or have any existence after this. And you're not really sure what happens, because the reset button is so weird, and the ship just disappears. And so do the goblins just never exist? Are they stopped? Will they be back? I hope not, but not just for the sake of babies, but
are they dream crabs, basically? Do they just crumble into dust and never heard of again? Yeah.
I mean, the evil, quote unquote evil here, is kind of glossed over, which again I think is to the story's detriment. But the plot succeeding, I mean, you can never really do it. You can't really have the goblins succeed in eating a baby. I mean, this isn't The Walking Dead.
Yes. Well, also, if the evil plot succeeds, Davina McCall is dead. The doctor doesn't save her in time.
True, and that actually is a good entry point to our third question, which is, of course, where is the Clara Splinter? And you can see where I'm going with this already. So I feel that her intervention is to essentially warn the doctor that Davina McCall is about to catch a very sharp Christmas star with her eye socket. And that's how the doctor knows, because he just seems to have his Time Lord sense go off, and he's like, oh, wait a second, when he's in the apartment there. I forgot about something. I'll see you later. He runs off in the TARDIS and saves Davina McCall, which is great. Yay, Davina's all right, and he saved her life, and it's Merry Christmas, Davina McCall. but it's never explained. It's not even like a coincidence. He just sort of suddenly knows that she's in danger. So it's got to be Clara. Clara must have done something. Basically said, "Hey, you forgot your scarf here at ITV. You got to come get it."
Well, maybe this doctor, because he is so in touch with himself and with all things, and really seems to be interested in learning stuff. Maybe this doctor is just like in touch with the Clara Splinter. Maybe she pops up on the TARDIS monitor and she's like, "Hey, you got to save Davina McCall," and he's like, "Okay, thanks, babes." By the way, I love that babes is kind of Ncuti's thing. Like, he calls Ruby that, and it kind of works.
Plural. He's a plural. I think everyone else is a plural in his mind. Makes sense.
But I love the scene. I still love the scene of him running along the rooftop with the coat out behind him, and he's like, "Who does that? Who sees a ladder and says that's for me? I'm going to jump on that, babes." She screams back,
God was great. God was great. He's super athletic. Great. He's got so many great lines. He's got his energy. He's just magnetic. I mean, he almost saves the thing.
But in terms of the Clara Splinter, splintered at the end of Name of the Doctor, somewhere in the background of every Doctor Who story, where is she in this one? I think she may also have been calling the priest or the vicar. We're not really sure what denomination the church on Ruby Road is, are we? But somehow this guy seems to know that there's a baby on his step at midnight.
That's true.
And he just happens to open that door. So I think Clara's the one who calls the priest/vicar to alert him to there's going to be a baby on your doorstep at midnight.
Not as much coincidence, thanks to our Clara Splinters. Good stuff.
Exactly. She's dialing down the level of coincidence to prevent the goblins from making use of that.
Good job, Clara. All right. Coming to the final question, the ultimate question, the only question that matters for the church on Ruby Road. What did we think of this story? The Pull to Open rating system has 6 ratings. There's the Dalek, which we give to a good episode of Doctor Who. The Ogron, which we give to a not-so-good episode of Doctor Who. The Professor Hater, which we give to a bad episode, but hey, at least we learned something or they tried something. The Viscount Banger, which we reserve for the best of the best. The Fixed Point in Time, which is a show beyond rating, often for reasons of nostalgia. And The Lady Cassandra, which is a paper-thin plot, but hey, it looks fantastic, especially with moisturizing.
All right.
You want the last word, or do you want me to have
it? You go first, because I think my answer is going to be more pleasant and uplifting than yours. So.
Well, I hate to say it. Again, I was rooting for this show, as I said earlier, but I find that the story is just lazy. It's a lazy story. It pokes you over and over again. It's always like, hey, isn't this great? Isn't Gatwa charming? Don't you love how crazy this universe we have is? Aren't you happy? Aren't you sad? It seems like it's just constantly giving me those applause signs, and I don't want them or need them. Like yes, I can see Gatwa's charming. I can see he's great. I know the Doctor Who universe is filled with infinite possibility, and you can do whatever you want. But you know what? You have to earn it. You can't be lazy about it. You need to have a solid story here, and I just feel like the cast was more than capable. They're here. They're hitting the ground running. This the RTD isn't, frankly. He somehow sort of stumbled out of the gate with his new Doctor. So it's not terrible. Like, again, I think the cast almost saves it, but it is not that good. So, I mean, this is essentially a Professor Hater. He's kind of a drunk Professor Hater. He had a little too much Christmas wine, that guy. But I think we learned how not to do Doctor Who in this new era.
Wow. Okay. Well, I kind of like. I mean, the randomizers taking us to our points of conflict here, because I had such a different opinion from you that it's kind of fascinating, and I feel like this is probably a sign that this is going to continue through season 1. That you and I might have some intriguingly different takes on these stories that will make for a very dramatic series of cold opens.
Before we get into that, I realized I didn't pull out my big guns, which are my kids.
Yes, please do.
So neither were that enthusiastic. They literally said, when I asked them, like, what'd you guys think of that? They do like the new cast. They do like Ncuti. They do like Millie Gibson. They did not like the singing. And they hated the Mrs. Flood line at the end. They thought it was just really bad. Like I said, we all just had ooze revulsion when that happened again. Okay.
Wow.
There we go.
Wow, I'm not going to repeat my defense of Anita Dobson, British national treasure. I will simply ask everyone listening to go to the most recent Doctor Who magazine, where there is an interview with Anita Dobson talking about Mrs. Flood. In some, like, if you were to ask me to rate Mrs. Flood, I would say Fixed Point in Time. Partly because of Anita Dobson, partly because I know a little bit about what's coming up. But just as to rate this story as a whole, like, I don't think it's a banger. I don't think it's one of the best of the best. Like, it is playing it a little safe, but I think that, the scale of the task of what RTD has to do here is enormous. And we saw the scale of the mountain that he's climbing when we saw Flux, because he does, as this story shows, he does fully intend to absorb the Timeless Child into Who canon. He's not going to completely ignore it. He's not going to throw it in our faces, but it's clearly going to be reference, right? The Doctor talking about how he recently discovered that he was a foundling himself. There's clearly a theme here, and I'm very glad that Doctor Who is investigating it. The whole thing about foundlings and whether this is what the Doctor's doing with his companions himself. So yeah, it's a Christmas Dalek for me. It's a Dalek with twinkly lights, and maybe the Dalek has had a bit too much to drink. And maybe if you open up the Dalek casing, it's actually a goblin activating it inside there. And the goblin is actually singing. But mercifully for you, Pete, the Dalek translation tool is just coming out with either explain or exterminate. To all of the lines from the Goblin song. But yeah, it's a Dalek for me. It's a solid episode of Doctor Who. Your points are well taken, sir. I respect your opinion, and I have a completely different one. And I'm kind of glad of that, because like so many times in our random adventure, we end up on the same side on things, and it's nice for a little bit of point versus point to be injected here.
I'll just say we did toy with the idea of making the Goblin the worst rating earlier, and you did say there's a Goblin in the Dalek, so maybe we had the same rating. Okay, good stuff. Disagree and agreeing to disagree.
Yes, indeed. As we all are. I mean, one thing we can all agree is that we are looking forward to Doctor Who being back on our screens.
Yes.
Yes.
That is unanimous. Okay,
right.
It's fine to then, hit the reset button on this podcast maybe, and then find out where we're going next by activating the randomizer.
Yes, indeed. The randomizer has two components. Pete is at the controls of the first one. He is looking at the codex, which is our complete list of Doctor Who stories in sequential order. They're being ticked off week by week. We had, I think I'll never forget, we had 187 last time, right? Because the randomizer then chose the number 187, so we instantly knew what it was. That was extraordinary. I still can't believe they did that, but of course there are no coincidences. So the minimum number is 1 that I'm plugging into the executor, aka random.org, which is bespoke randomness that uses atmospheric noise and general levels of coincidence in the atmosphere to predict its random numbers. So the minimum number is 1. The maximum number is what now? 186?
186, sir.
Wow. Okay. Do not choose 186 because that. Well, actually, do choose it, randomizer, because that would take us to Power of the Doctor.
No, that's the giggle, dude.
Sorry, the giggle. God, how could... I'm so sorry. I've erased the 14th Doctor 3 or 4 times in this podcast. I'm so sorry, David Tennant. It would be the giggle. Okay. Well, that would be appropriate, because I did, rewatch the giggle recently, and the randomizer does like to, point out when I'm doing extracurricular viewing and say, I see you. But yeah, we do like to issue challenges to the randomizer, and... God, I don't even know on this one. So, Pete, you want to go? You want to go first in your challenge?
I feel a little bad for dissing Gatwa's first full adventure on the eve of his season. So I'm going to give him a freebie. Take us to Pertwee. His favorite doctor.
Yes, take us to the other slutty doctor, as Ncuti called him. Interesting. I'm going to say, take us to an old Who episode that makes it clear that this was originally and remains a show for kids.
Interesting. Okay.
Let's
go for that.
All right.
Ready for a countdown?
Ready.
All right.
Goblins at the ready. Activating rope.
Here we go, kid. Here we go. 4, 3, 2, 1.
No, not the mind probe.
It's not 186, but it is 168.
Oh my goodness. Thin Ice. We're back.
Wow, we're back in the Randomizer's favorite Dr. Capaldi.
That's right.
And we're there with Bill Potts, who, by the way, there are no coincidences, Pete. Do you remember that Bill Potts was fostered?
Oh, wow. No, I vaguely remember that. I didn't really remember that as a key part of her character, but that's interesting. So
not a
mother
key
was
part.
A foster mother.
I believe so. Yeah, I think that's that.
Or was it her mother and then she had a foster mother after her mother? We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. I literally just read it in Doctor Who magazine. RTG was reminding us that there's sort of foundling and orphan lore throughout Doctor Who history, and that Bill Potts was part of it. So. Yes, Thin Ice. We're going to be exploring the Thames, and we're going to be exploring race and time travel is going to be a very interesting part of this discussion.
Oh, that's true.
It is fully explored and not often explored in Who history. So, yeah, looking forward to that discussion.
All right, me too. And we would like to thank you, dear listener, for listening to our discussion of the church on Ruby Road. Hey, if you liked what happened here, you can go ahead and subscribe for more of this. So whatever podcast app you're in, please follow us. We are a podcast after all. You can, of course, also follow us on YouTube. If you're not looking at us right now and you're not in Spotify video podcasts, you might be looking at us on YouTube. But if you're not, we're on YouTube. And if you are on YouTube, you can also become a member. You can also become a true companion of the podcast for a low monthly fee of $7.99. You will get the podcast a day early and the good feeling in your hearts that you're supporting great commentary on Doctor Who. You can also support us on Patreon. We are at patreon.com/pull2open. And we actually get all of our notes, that we get a good chunk of them out on the podcast. But the ones we don't, you can still get by subscribing to our newsletter. And that's at pull2open.net. Full written notes on every single episode we talk about. All those great ways to support the pod and get more great commentary on this fine show we call Doctor Who.
Yes, do go check out the notes file, because Pete had a lot to say about this, and it's I don't know if you got to it all, but it's all in there. And I was gagged, so I have not a single thing to say about this other than what I've said on the show. I probably already said too much. The Disney ninjas are on their way, and I hope to see you next time for Thin Ice.
All right, thanks for listening, guys. Follow us on social media at Pull2Open63 on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Threads, and Pull2Open on TikTok, where we post a lot of videos, and Blue Sky. Thank you, Martin West, as ever, for our great music. And we will see you next time when we slip on some thin ice.
All right. Take care, babes.